Kia ora. Tēnā koutou katoa. So excited to be here on a beautiful Auckland day. It's hard to follow pets.
So
I was actually a bit
makes this peanut butter.
I don't mind, everyone gets excited about peanut butter. This morning I was thinking, I'll definitely perk things up after all that heavy talk, but then I had to follow the cute pets, which is a little bit harder. I am really excited to talk about FMCG marketing because I come from an agency background and FMCG has always been one of my favourite categories. It's a super fun category to work in. It's something that people have every day, something that they reach for automatically on the shelves. They reach for branded cues. Sometimes you couldn't even remember the name of the brand that you're buying. It's just something that you pick off the shelf. In terms of advertising, there's so much fun to be had in this category. So I've always loved having a bit of a peanut butter side hustle, helping my stepdad. He never really liked my advice because Pic has a bit of a thing about what he calls fancy pants marketers. So he'd be very uncomfortable in this room, let me tell you. I had been on the advisory board for 10 years before taking over as CEO, so just been in the role for 4 months. And I actually used to help write the marketing plans because Dad used to say, oh, Hun, can you do some, I don't know, have you got time to do some of that marketing stuff? And I used to just write, because I was also the client basically, and so no one would ever critique, and I'd just get to kind of pretty much write what I thought. And so I wrote that our ambition was to be the best loved peanut butter company in the world. I think I've written that same thing for many other clients in my time. So I thought I'd talk about this in sort of 3 phases. So there's the startup phase where it's all good fun, and actually it was just Pic working out of first of all his kitchen at home in Whakatū Nelson, and then out of an old freezing works, which was probably not food safe. Then we got to the stage where we were selling a lot of peanut butter at markets, and we actually needed to try and get into supermarkets because distribution is really everything with FMCG at the beginning. And then phase 3, which is sort of my phase, the world is our peanut. There's a lot of nut puns to be had. I'm trying to get them all out of my system in the first few months. So, just a little bit more about me. So I was basically brought up in brand agencies. So I've been trained by some of the biggest and best agencies. I spent 5 years of my career with Saatchi down in the Wellington office when they were really on top of their game. I got to work a year up in the New York office, which was very boring but sounds really cool. And I did get to work with Procter & Gamble up there, who are amazing and really wrote the marketing textbook on FMCG marketing. And I did get to make advertising for some really fantastic FMCG brands. So up the top right there, my first job at a company called Mojo, I got to work on Bluebird, which is really where I started getting my love for FMCG marketing, because we made ads with these little cute penguins, and they never said anything, but the whole point was around the sociability of penguins doing crazy stuff. And that was good fun. I also worked on the lotteries account both across Saatchi and at DDB, and got to make the longest ad of my career, which was a 2-minute 30 video which went out. Nikki Greville did the media, I believe, on a 2-minute 30 roadblock across network news across 3 channels. Sorry, but that was a really big deal at the time. And we took a dog over to India, and yes, the dog did go to a very good home. He went to live with the New Zealand ambassador, I believe, in India after we made the ad. Did work with Nigella at Assignment Group, working on Whittaker's chocolate. And then also in this ad here, there is a jar of peanut butter for the first person when I finish and get off the stage who can tell me what's happening in this ad. That is a campaign that won 2 gold lions at Cannes. The creatives had to get me to go through it with my finger to figure it out too, because it's not obvious. So, the first thing we did with peanut butter is we had a no advertising policy. So that was literally the rule. And partly it was because Pic doesn't believe in fancy pants marketing people, and also because he really wanted to do things differently. And he is a classic entrepreneur. He's always run his own businesses. He is not really fit to work for anybody else. It's just in his DNA. And we would say, I guess in agency language, you'd say he's one of those guys who likes to zig when everyone else is zagging. And the fact that he could be an independent thinker and look at this absolutely commoditized category, which is what peanut butter was when he started, and think, I could do better, sort of really sums up the DNA of the whole business. The other part was we had zero money, like there just was no money for advertising. So the key marketing lesson is about really just having to do it differently. So in the startup phase, I'm just going to give you a little bit about the story of Pic Pico, my stepfather, no longer married to my mother either. It is quite complicated, but it is a great story about a barefoot hippie, and yes, we did have a house on a commune when I was a kid, who has actually become a peanut butter king and is now sort of part of the establishment in Nelson, the business establishment. So the Spreadsale was this really dark and depressing place. It was dominated by sugary craft and actually kind of boring sanitarium. Apologies to anyone from sanitarium. And Pic, who had always been a peanut butter lover, just thought this was rubbish. And in particular, it was the sugar that set him off one day. And he made a call to the 0800 complaints number and said, "This is outrageous. Why is there sugar in my peanut butter?" And they said, "But sir, the customers like it that way." And he thought, hang on a minute, I remember my mum, Barbara, and my aunt Betty making peanut butter in the kitchen. It surely can't be that hard. So he went out, bought himself a load of nuts, tried roasting them in the oven at home. It's actually really hard. You have to keep nuts turning to get an even roast. So he kept burning them. He blew up his home blender, but he did make what he thought was really delicious peanut butter. And he set up selling it at the Whakatu Nelson markets. These are very famous Saturday markets in Nelson where we still sell our peanut butter. And people started loving it. So the trick to a good peanut butter is actually in what's called a high oleic nut, which means it's full of really good fats and a really nice oily nut. Pic found his in Australia, and we now buy our nuts from Australia and also Brazil because we can't get enough out of Australia, but they have a really similar taste profile. The other trick is in the fresh roast and how you keep the nuts turning. We now have this massive, I don't know how long it is, like 20-metre long oven, which we call Roasting Matilda because it came from Australia. It's a little bit like coffee, if you think about it like coffee. So the way that you roast the nut and the moisture in the soil that the nut has grown and the moisture in the air, every batch of nuts comes in slightly differently, and you adjust the roast around that so you get a really nice, consistent flavour. So we did have a good product, great nuts, but in a marketing sense, we really had two things to work with. One was Pic, who luckily is just an absolutely natural salesperson. He is gregarious, he is enthusiastic, he's interesting, he's a storyteller. So he was like a one-man enthusiastic band for great peanut butter and a huge part of the journey to where we're at today. And the second thing we had was our label, because with grocery products, it sits in your pantry or it sits on the table in front of you, particularly at breakfast. So we decided to actually try and do that a bit differently. And instead of, normally if you're in packaging, you're thinking about really specific cues and specific colours. You want things really simple. Things look really different under supermarket lights. I've learnt that the hard way, repacking mainland cheese. And so actually what Pic decided is he decided to cram as much information as possible onto one label. Plus he was making it on his home printer. So I just want to talk to you about the stars, as Trudy was just talking about when I walked in with the star bag, which has become one of, thank you, my lovely assistant Lash, has actually become one of our brand icons, and you can see the stars on the pack, and I'd like to tell you that Pic chose them really carefully, but we got the stars because they were free on Microsoft Word. That is the story of our star. Our biggest brand icon was free. So essentially, when we used to look at packaging, we used to basically call it a publication on a jar. And even now, we still cram a lot. We've sort of been playing, you can see with some of the new products we've done, it's got a little more simpler, a little more sophisticated, a little more maybe like what the fancy pants marketers would do. So it's a really interesting time for me to be thinking about how to strike a balance between my trained marketing instinct and then the way we do it at Pics, which is to do it differently. Another quick story on that jar. So that was pretty much the original jar, and actually I worked on the repackaging for this in 2011, I think it was. I was on maternity leave, so I had a little bit of time. And what we're selling there is peanut butter, and that's really, Pic was just selling peanut butter at the market. And what I had learnt from talking to people was that people were like, oh yeah, I buy that peanut butter with the brown label and the red star, but they couldn't tell you what the brand is. And when you look back now, we actually had a choice between, is the brand Pics, because you can barely see that there, or is the brand really good? And we weren't sure, and we sort of, anyway, we rejigged the pack and we're on to something else now, but it was quite an interesting time on actually making choices about brand. And Pic was petrified, didn't really want to listen to what I had to say, and I did actually have to go and run some consumer groups to reassure him that the new packaging wasn't, like, really no one was going to notice anything at all, as we all know. So, just give you a little clip of Pic. If I could have brought him, I would have, but he's over in Nepal, and he just got married in the Himalayas on a mountain to his third wife.
It's amazing, eh? It's the nicest peanut butter in the world, and we make it here.
So follow me. This Craig there is unloading boxes and stuff. Come on, quick. We've only got a minute.
We make it here. We get nuts from Australia, and we roast them and squish them up, put them in a jar.
Peanuts and salt.
It's the best peanut butter in the world.
He's very, very convincing. So, that was the start off. Things were going quite well. Next track, getting some distribution. So, word of mouth and brand advocacy were sort of the two things that Pic really held on to. He would never use the words brand advocacy, but he said, I reckon our customers are much more believable than having a sales force or having sales reps out on the road or having marketing people. So with him at the markets, he would actually work the market every Saturday and just he would chase after people with his tasting stick and actually get them to put the peanut butter in their mouths, and we knew there was a great product. He was also onto this really early and interesting distribution model where he would sell to all his old hippie mates around the country. He'd sell them peanut butter for $5 a jar, and they would then go and sell it at their market. So it was being sold at markets all over New Zealand for $10 a jar, so they were making $5. They had their beer money for the week. At the time, I was running a company in Wellington called Park Road Post-Production, which was part of Weta Group, working for Peter Jackson. It was my first really big leadership job. I had 70 people, never worked in post-production, I didn't really know what I was doing, but it was a good time. And Pic sent me a box of peanut butter with an invoice at $5 a jar, and I was like, dude, I got movies to make, I don't really care about your peanut butter. But I managed to flog it off for $10 a jar, as he recommended, and it kept selling out. And I thought, shit, I think he's onto something. And Wellington being a super small town, I rang around a few people and managed to find the buyer for more Wilsons. And I went to his house that night, I'm not sure how I talked my way into that, and literally convinced him to stock Pic's peanut butter. And that was our first supermarket outside of Nelson. So Pic had managed to get into the Nelson supermarket, and then we got into more Wilsons. The other thing Pic loved to do was actually invite people in to watch the peanut butter being made. We didn't have a very interesting factory then. I think that's when we were still in the freezing works. And then you saw in the little video a sort of fancier factory. That was our third factory at Elm Street, where we built the factory inside this sort of prefab glass room with huge glass windows, and there were no set tour times, but people would just roll up to the factory, and then someone would kind of go, oh, come and have a look through the window at how we make the peanut butter. So it was this word of mouth and this incredible enthusiasm that Pic had. We also started getting out to the food shows, and that's my stepbrother there that Pic is leaning on in the Star T-shirt. So, you know, there's lots of nepotism in this business. My cousin's also the IT guy. There's a lot of it, but it's great. Pic also undertook what we called the Great Toaster Tour of New Zealand. So he'd bought an Airstream, which he imported in from the UK, I think, and on my 40th birthday, I just had a baby, so I was still breastfeeding, so we had a family thing went out to the Hawke's Bay, rented a house, and my stepdaughter, who I think was 15 at the time, Lily, super creative mind, and she was talking to Pic about this silver caravan, and she goes, "Oh, Pic, you should put a couple of pieces of toast on the top like a giant toaster," and that's literally where it came from, and that's what he did. He also bought that Holden, which currently sits in our factory as part of the tour. I'm told it doesn't go, but it is very cool, probably not environmentally friendly. He went out and talked to Vogel's and Dual Lit Toasters, and they both came on board as partners for this great toaster tour. Nothing was official. There were no council permits or anything like that. Pic had his first ex-wife driving. He has a sight issue, which I'll come to, so he can't drive. So Margie was driving the Holden. The two of them hooned around the country. We had social media had started, and we were literally telling people where we were going and what we were doing on social media, but in the very early days. And we gave away for free pieces of Vogel's toast with Pic's peanut butter, and he just handed them out of the window. If you were really hungry, you could buy a whole piece, more substantial, for a donation which went to the Blind Foundation. And that is a little side story that's not particularly well known. Some people do know, but Pic is legally blind. He has macular degeneration where you lose your sight in patches, and he has a guide dog called Fido. So you'll often see black lab things in our marketing material, and that's actually Fido. So here's a little snippet of Pic leaning out of the Dual Lit toaster. Oh, it's not. Yes.
So my name's Pic. I'm the guy who makes this peanut butter. I'm called Pic because my name's Pic Pico, and my mum calls me Bruce, but all my friends call me Pic, and so that's my name there on the label. Beautiful peanut butter. We make it here in Nelson.
He's big on Nelson. The other thing that we timed brilliantly, not by planning, but just by good luck, is we were a brand that started sort of in the early days of social media. So we had this incredible advantage where we could build really good audiences just completely organically. We only started doing paid posting, I think, about 2 years ago. So we really got a fantastic run at it before all the algorithms changed and everything was really tricky. We were hugely experimental, and so when you dig back onto our social channels, there's some sort of really wonky stuff, but it just feels okay for us and our brand. I was doing a little bit of the marketing stuff in the background, but we did decide that we needed someone who could come in and sort of take control a bit more, and also our channels were really content hungry, so you literally needed someone who could do more writing and things like that. Pic is a great writer, but the eyesight thing, which is degenerative, was really making it tricky for him. So we found a fabulous woman who was our head of marketing for a long time called Nikki Neat, and Nikki had been working in the UK in PR for a TV channel, and she was a PR person. We thought, great, she's not a marketer, she's something slightly different. And the most important thing is she could get on with Pic and she could write like Pic, and she just had what you'd call zero marketing discipline. Nothing was written down. She hated doing the marketing plans, didn't like a written brief, but together they were kind of off on a roll and just having a really great time. The social media thing has changed, and we now run quite a big team, and for me coming in, it's really interesting because I find it really hard to keep up with the social, and I've come out of a comms background, but I'm just at an age where I'm not really fit for purpose for that stuff, so I literally couldn't run the channels. But we're much more sophisticated now. There's quite different strategies for each channel, different audiences across the channels, and we do work with our media agency, MBM, give us a bit of help. They do roll their eyes at some of the crazy things we do. So all of this did culminate in us winning the Long-Term Marketing Excellence Award a couple of years ago. That was pretty exciting because we'd been, this no advertising policy, Pic's allergic to the word marketing. I don't think he sort of realizes what a natural marketer he is, and he's such an ideas person. I'm like, man, you missed your calling in agency land. He would have had a brilliant time. But really, the things that I've been talking about, our biggest challenge was keeping, I don't like to be gender specific, but it's relevant in this case, the kind of little guy's values at the heart of what we did, to stay aligned with who Pic is and his DNA. And we really built the brand through word of mouth from people who really love peanut butter rather than, salespeople or professional marketers at the time. There was another really interesting point. I don't even know if we did this purposefully, but when one of the team were writing the marketing award entry and sent it to me to go through, I went, I never thought we'd done that. But there's this sort of strategy of sometimes you have really cheap product and you have cheap looking branding, right? So it's a real value thing for the consumer. We've definitely seen cheap product with premium branding, which also works really well, can do that. And then there's obviously premium product and premium branding. We were kind of like Us About Face in that we had this really high-end premium product at a really high price point when we first went out, but we had this really kind of cheap-looking branding, this really kind of hokey, homemade looking. It was homemade. And when I worked on that repack in 2011, and again keeping it in the family, my sister, who works in advertising in New York, said to me, just for God's sake, please get rid of the Comic Sans. It's just an embarrassment. I can't tell anybody that I'm associated with this brand. And her surname actually is Pico. And I had given a brief to a designer to, craft it up a bit. Typical marketing brief, just make this a little more craft. And she kept coming back with these designs that just didn't feel on brand. They were really beautiful, but they were too beautiful. And I was sitting in bed one night with my partner, who was a creative, so basically gets to work on anything I'm working on. And I said, I just can't figure out where we're going wrong. And he looked at it and he goes, oh, you've just completely missed the whole essence of the brand. You just need to be a bit hokey. That's what you are, you're a bit hokey. So I was like, then that actually kind of made its way into our, what I called brand onion, until someone pointed out the obvious, it should be a brand peanut. The other thing we did is we did shitloads of PR. So PR, Pic as the PR mouthpiece was a really strong selling point for us. The packaging was massive, the social media, and then starting to get out and about at events and food shows and things like that. So we called it long-term branding the old-fashioned ways, because you've got to tell a good story in your marketing awards entry, as we all know, but basically where the brand harnesses the power of advocacy from its customers. The result is we are now, from having been a market brand, we essentially created the premium peanut butter category. We now have a nearly 40% share of the market. We are far and away the number one, more than outsell the competitor 2-1, and at the moment, with the way the economy is, people feeling the pressure, is actually helpful for premium brands, because what you tend to see in grocery is it splits into premium, where people really see the value. Maybe that the little lipstick analogy before, we, at the grocery store is somewhere where you can buy yourself a treat, so you will eat the good peanut butter. We went through the roof during COVID, like just crazy sales. And then home brand, house brand and value really sort of balance up, and you can really see that on our, I know there's a tracksuit person here, I love the tracksuit data, you can really see it in the sales data, the share data, and then also in the brand awareness levels through the tracksuit tool. So this is all brilliant. So the startup guy starts it up, does really well, then the fancy pants marketer comes in and has to keep it going, right? Which is quite a responsibility, because it is a family company. As my sister says, you're working for my inheritance. Don't mess it up. She's got a very expensive lifestyle in New York. So this here is a picture that I've stolen from my mate, Peter Cullinane, who I worked for. Peter Cullinane was the founder of the Lewis Road Creamery brand, and his awesome son, Tim Cullinane, who's also a genius, I worked with him at DDB, is sitting here. And this comes from the Lewis Road Creamery. I call it the Little Blue Book. I think it's been called various things, and Peter open sourced it for everyone, but it's basically his whole lot of tips for succeeding in life and business. And this one here is reminding us that, well, your brand, that you need to be the pirate ship, not a cruise liner. And that's a really important thing when you become the number one brand. Luckily, I had worked with Whittaker's on the really golden time where their market share for creamy milk chocolate finally overtook Cadbury's dairy milk. So for years, I didn't work with them at Saatchi, but they were a Saatchi client, and they were like this challenger, newcomer brand, you know, always going after Cadbury, so you've got a really clear kind of job to do. You know who your enemy is and you know what you're chasing, and then suddenly you're number one, and how do you not act like the big guys? And the strategy we came up for Whittaker's when they asked us that question is we said, well, Cadbury is basically run by accountants, so when they make the decisions, they go to the accountant to get the decision approved. So what we should do is think about what the accountants would do and do exactly the opposite. And it's sort of a lesson that's in my mind at Pics, and I think that's what Peter was saying with this pirate ship thing. You've just got to stay kind of hungry and nimble and all of those things. The other point he made was that digital has really changed the calculus, and it's never been cheaper to launch a brand, and that's essentially what we did. You know, on one hand, I've been working on $2 million TV commercials, and then I'm working on Pics where everything, you know, basically was 2 cents, mates doing favours for free. So it's sort of been this really interesting journey. But the lesson I really think is to just keep trying to think like a challenger brand and not like the incumbent. So be a pirate ship, not a cruise liner. However, in saying that, it was really easy when it was just Pic and Nikki making up a little bit of pack copy, whacking it out, me getting someone in the agency to slip a design job through on the side to make sure the artwork wasn't corrupted. About a year ago, the team at Pics, and you know, it's a marketing team of sort of 5 people now, were really having trouble, and they'd just say, oh, it's a brand, you just get it, like you get it or you don't get it. But actually what we learned is that the pirates really needed some rules, because we were doing some really random stuff, which is kind of hilarious, and it's a brand that takes a bit of random, so we didn't worry about it too much, but things were sort of getting quite widely spread, and there were several different versions of logos and different straplines, and no one knew what they meant. So we did decide we actually had to try and do some of that stuff that Pic wouldn't like, which is like codifying what makes us different. But we did it in a nice agency kind of way. So we decided, you know, who's our enemy? And our enemy was about following the crowd and doing what other people are doing. And even in our journey to becoming the best-selling peanut butter, we have done things differently to some of our competitors. There are heaps of people in craft peanut butter now. There's lots of great craft peanut butters, which is amazing for the customer because you've got lots of choice, you know, it keeps the prices down, all of those things. But we want to make sure that we just stay true to ourselves, and our insight was nothing special ever comes from following the rules, and our idea that we try to keep top of mind in the office when making decisions is just like doing what feels good for us, not what the market says we should be doing or what the consumer trend is, because we are really determined to be an intergenerational family company. And again, I look at Whittaker's, having worked with them, you know, they're 3rd or 4th generation, I think, which is, you know, a big deal. So I hope this is a company, you know, that can work like that. I'm eyeing my kids up for factory jobs already. We also talked a lot about sustainability earlier today, and I didn't really go into that, but I think the answer to sustainability is B Corp. We are a B Corp. The last agency I was at, we went through the B Corp application process. I also hold some governance roles, and for me as a director, what I love about B Corp is it actually changes the legal framework of a company. And as a director, it means that you are legally obligated to balance decisions for profit as well as people and planet. Otherwise, if you don't have that as a framework, as a director, your responsibility is to the shareholders, and the shareholders aren't usually that worried about the sustainability packaging and what you're doing. They want to know if they get a dividend that year. So that legal framework is huge. If anyone wants to talk to me about B Corp at any time, I'm a huge fan and happy to talk about it. We also do, just one more note on that, is that carbon is the biggest issue, essentially, for companies. And for a company like ours, we're manufacturing and transporting, and it's carbon. So the key is not just offsetting the carbon, but reducing your carbon as much as possible. I can see Nikki nodding, thank you, Nikki. And then offset what you can't reduce. We have made, I think, something crazy like a nearly 50% reduction in our carbon over the last couple of years, and then we offset as well. There's great offsetters. Toitu are really popular. We actually offset with Ecos, who are a Whakatū Nelson company, so we work with them. The other most awesome brand tool, I haven't been time checking, is that we got to open Pics Peanut Butter World, which is our 4th factory. This one was purpose-built. Pic did the brief to the architect, and his brief was one word. I told you he missed his calling in advertising. The word was steampunk. That was the brief to the architect for a peanut butter factory. The engineers have had a few complaints about the way the factory line works, but it looks amazing. So we're now one of the leading tourist attractions in Nelson, which is a really awesome thing to be, and it's a great give back to the community as well. People are super proud of this factory. There's a retail store and there is a cafe on site. So it's kind of, and we're out in Stoke, which is, if anyone's been to Nelson, is kind of the outskirts of Nelson, and it's not that exciting out there. So we're sort of like this attraction and hub. I also love retail stores that are like a hero touch point for a brand, and those of you who are around my age will probably remember when Bendon opened their own showcase retail store in Newmarket, and it was like such a big deal because instead of bras and undies being sold at farmers in that retail environment, they actually had this incredible, lush, super sophisticated, like really beautiful experience that made you feel really good as a woman, because bra shopping's actually not much fun. So we have this incredible touch point. In summer, our tours, so we run daily tours. In summer, we run 4 tours a day, 30 people each tour, and they are booked out weeks in advance. They are free, but every tour is an hour, and we have these incredible tour guides who just do this amazing job. And for an hour, we have these people that the entire thing is this incredible brand experience of them looking at how we make peanut butter. They come out and they do some tastings. I did one on my first week at work. I worked in the factory and I went on a consumer tour, and people get so excited about peanut butter. And I've always got this thing at work, like, we're not saving lives, like it's just peanut butter, have a bit of fun, don't worry about it, and don't let anything stress you too much. But people get really genuinely excited. So I say to everyone at work, everyone in the factory and the team, got 50 people, if you're having a shitty day, honestly put yourself on a tour and just watch people get really excited about peanut butter, and it will warm the cockles of your heart. So for me, the marketing lesson here is just this incredible opportunity to really immerse people in your brand the way that you want. And when I was watching Animates, the Animates presentation, I just got that sense of how much fun that Animates have with the brand and the little creatures. And, when you walk into the stores and there's always, you can smell the wet dog from the dog wash or the wet goat, and, there's animals everywhere. It's just like such a great brand experience. The other thing we've done is we broke our own rules and we did some advertising. We worked with Augusto last year. Funnily enough, that's the advertising agency I was running at the time, so Augusto did the work for 2 cents. And we sort of put our toe in the water, and we did some street posters because it just felt a little bit us, and MBM were like, yeah, street posters, that's cool. And we just wanted to see how that felt. They looked awesome out on the street, made me quite excited, and I noticed that MBM very cleverly, I live in Wellington, they had some street posters down in Eastbourne where I live, so I kept seeing them, and I'm like, that old trick, they've got me. We also made some little 6-second videos trying to use best practice. It's really hard, having come from the creative side, when you work with a great media agency, they're creative enablers, not like you can't do this, you can't do that. Social has made it super, super hard because best practice is 6 seconds, it mentions the brand in like the first 2 seconds. But MBM was super good to work with, and they partnered really well with our creatives to try and lay out some frameworks and parameters to make some work that worked. So I love these are my favourite kind of FMCG advertising because they're like really cheap, like they're so cheap, but they're just really fun, and they kind of just stick to the simple truth, which is the product is really simple, and that's what I love about them. cute. I mean, it's not $2 million or 2 minutes 30, right? But they're quite fun. The other thing we've done, I'm so naughty. I didn't want it. This is literally a portrait-sized ad, and I couldn't be asked to get anyone to try and relay it out, so I just chopped it off in the middle. But this is the first print ad that we've run, and I was out at Pics Batch out at the beach near Nelson, and I was fossicking around in the shed at the back, and I found this old poster on the wall that looked like this, and I was like, holy shit, this is great. This is like a full-page press piece of just copy, and I was trying to photograph it to send it to my partner, going, this is really awesome, and I was sending him all these little snapshots, and then he'd taken it into the agency and like sellotaped it together with the team to try and put it back together. And we just got super excited because it felt like, you know, we all know, like, never throw 10 tennis balls, the consumer won't catch your message, only throw one, single-minded, blah, blah, blah. And this is just like stuffed full of hilarious information, and it gave me like a really great sense of the brand and reminded me of the things that I love, and I am going to read one bit out. So on some of our jars we have these random icons, right? Sometimes there's a black Labrador, and so my marketing brain goes, that makes sense, Pic has a guide dog, we can leverage that, blah, blah, blah. We had some lawnmowers and some chickens, and I'm like, oh, they gotta go, like there's no meaning in those, get rid of them, there's a concrete mixer, well that was our first mixer, so we'll keep that. Then when I found this poster, this is what Pic had written, what's with the mowers? You might see a lawnmower or two on your jar. You might also find chickens, dogs, hats or stars. Pic likes these things. If they bother you, a black felt pen will quickly sort them out. And I was just like, yeah, we're gonna keep them. They're so good. In the grand history of doing advertising, I don't know if we have MediaWorks billboards, but we have got some digital billboards going out with really fancy things like programmatic buys for after-school periods, because we can't take peanut butter into most schools. It's banned, but it is a great kid food, and kids love it. One of my kids, will only eat peanut butter sandwiches, so he will never eat his sandwiches at school, so we give him one after school. So this is the handy thing of me working there, my partner being the creative that's working on stuff, and he said, been thinking about that thing, and I think we should do something like after-school snacks, like we give Remy the sandwich. So there's some of these coming out as well. We've also made a few more of these little 6-seconders. And they're actually, interestingly on those, they were almost a little bit scary, because one of the things, you know, the brand codes for New Zealand has always been about being modest, right? We don't like braggers, and we never used to, we've actually been the number one peanut butter for a long time, but we never used to say it was like a thing you don't talk about it, because we just sort of seem like the little hippie guy in the corner. And so it felt a bit scary starting to talk about that, but I talked about it a bit in some of the business PR I did when I started, and we thought, let's actually use it in some of our above-the-line messaging, and we had, like, literally Facebook is where you get more of the axe grinders, so I was tracking the Facebook really carefully when we put the 6-seconders out, and it's interesting watching how the cultural codes of New Zealand are changing, and actually people were just so excited, and they were like, oh my God, of course you're number one, this is great, like you just got all this incredible and positive feedback because people felt like they'd been part of the journey to make us number one, which is true. So, the quick time check, I've got 5 minutes. I've got on the table 8 jars of peanut butter, some slugs, a couple of fancy branded bags. I am going to ask some questions. First person to yell it out gets a jar of peanut butter. Lash will bring it to your table, and then I will I'll leave a couple of minutes for questions at the end. Who remembers Pic's real name? Yes, lovely lady in the black over there. Bruce. Only his mother and the IRD call him Bruce. Did I say Pic's guide dog's name? Oh, one for the girl in purple here, and one down the back. I can't even see you, I just see your silhouette. But the silhouette said Fido down there. Okay. 2 things make a great peanut butter. Can anyone remember what the 2 things are? Yes, high lag peanuts. Woo, woo. And the second thing? Oh, no, it's not salt, but that's, I mean, I could, fresh roast. Guy with the fresh roasted beard down there, he gets some. Right, any questions from anyone else?